is probably not going to be legible, but whatever, I don't care. The difference between something that's organic and inorganic is something that's organic contains carbon. Special properties of carbon that makes it an important compound. It has 4 valence electrons. So it can form how many covalent bonds? 4 covalent bonds, which allows it to build these ridiculously complex structures. So what are some of these complex structures that carbon can build? Well, it can build carbohydrates. It can build lipids. It can build proteins. Right? And it can build nucleic acids. Give examples of each. Well, one, carbohydrate. Starch is a carbohydrate, right? It's a polysaccharide. Lipids. There are these phospholipids that we use to... You guys could have put saturated fats, unsaturated fats, triglyceride molecules. All of that would have worked. You could have put glucose, right, as another example. All these are examples. We'll get to that later. An example of proteins are enzymes. Are examples. You guys can put. Nucleic acid, there's pretty much just 2 examples, DNA and RNA. Define the following terms. This is a building block. Of polymers. A single unit. Polymers are a chain of... You guys could have answered it different ways too. Polymerization is the process of building what? Polymers. Dehydration synthesis is when you remove a what? A H2O molecule to form a bond, a specific type of bond, a covalent bond. Oops. In order to join two monomers. It's where we remove water to build the polymer. You could have said that too. Simpler. That's probably a simpler definition. Hydrolysis is the opposite of dehydration synthesis. This is where you add a water to split two monomers. So if I want to digest starch and break it down into glucose, I need to add water. Yeah. You are the... Thank you. I wondered why I deleted that. Sometimes I actually do know how to spell. What group of organic compounds provides the bulk? Right, carbs. So when we look at this chart, we're going to go real fast here. These are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Well, this is the only one that has a really distinct ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. Lipids have carbon and hydrogen and oxygen as well. They have a lot of this, a lot, and a little bit of this. Okay? Proteins also carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but they also have an amine group which contains nitrogen, right? And they also have sulfur. Okay? So they have all of those, chones. Nucleic acids also carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. They don't have sulfur, they have a phosphate group. So the main difference between proteins and nucleic acids is that proteins will have sulfur in some of their amino acids. And nucleic acids like DNA have phosphates. So a monomer here is called a monosaccharide. An example, obviously, glucose. A monomer of lipids. Do they make monomers? They don't make monomers, right? They are made up of glycerol and fatty acids. But is it safe to say that it has a monomer? Not really. But we're going to put the building blocks there anyway. Proteins, the monomers are? I'll give you an example. Glycine. It's the simplest one. You built one. Nucleic acids, the monomer is? An example of one is one that contains adenine as its nitrogen base. You have one that has cytosine. Okay, you have another one that has guanine. And there's others as well. These are examples of different types of nucleotides. They contain different nitrogenous bases attached to them. Okay, polymer. We call this a polysaccharide. Examples: starch, glycogen, cellulose. Lipids. They form these big molecules called triglycerol molecules. They also called something called phospho. What? Okay, yeah. They don't really form polymers. So it actually makes sense to put these molecules in here. Right, guys? Proteins form polypeptides, polypeptide chains, and that's pretty much what a protein is. An example of a protein are all of our enzymes. Okay? Nucleic acids, we got DNA and RNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid. Carbohydrates are for short-term energy. Right? Because lipids are long-term energy. That's like energy storage. Right? If I have like a couple bucks in my pocket, I use it for the short term. If I need to go to the bank for my $100 bills, that's kind of long-term. Think of like fat, you got to go to the bank. But we also build things like cellulose, and this is to build structures. Oops. An example would be the cell walls of plants. Lipids are also used to build cell membranes. That's what phospholipids do, right? Phospholipid builds cell membranes. We also build steroids, right, which are from cholesterol. These are used as hormones in the body. Proteins have lots of functions. Enzymes. They're used for receptors in our cells. Signals like hormones in our cells. Antibodies. Okay, for our defense, we use for contractile units. Right, that's like our muscles for shortening of cells. We have transport proteins like hemoglobin, which transport oxygen. We have storage proteins. There's a lot of things that proteins do. That's just a couple of them. That's just what, 7. Nucleic acids, pretty much one big function. Stores genetic information. Mr. Vera, what's genetic information? Instructions to build what? Proteins. What's the difference between a monosaccharide and a polysaccharide? A monosaccharide is a single sugar. An example would be like glucose. This is many sugars connected. An example would be like starch, glycogen, cellulose. A saturated fat is solid at room temperature because it has those 3 straight fatty acids. A polyunsaturated is liquid at room temperature because one of those is going to be, it's going to have a kink. See how straight my lines are? Let's do this again. There's a saturated fat. Here's an unsaturated fat. Right? 3 parts that make up a nucleotide. It is a phosphate group, which is an atom of phosphate surrounded by oxygens. We have a 5-carbon sugar. And then we have one of many different types of nitrogen bases. Proteins are made up of chains of amino acids. What forces help to hold and maintain a protein's shape? Well, in this class, I really want you to know the main bond that holds amino acids together. What's that? Peptide bonds. Are there other forces? Yeah, we have hydrogen bonds. We have ionic bonds. Oops. We have nonpolar, but really the main one that I want you to know is that.